So I tried really hard to film this video outside for you guys. Colorado had different plans. It's been so snowy that all the places that I normally shuffle are really covered in snow or just covered in puddles. So I ended up doing this practice session at Crunch, which is where I normally practice in the winter, like when it's too cold and when I couldn't be bothered to go outside. So I filmed the whole practice session for you, and I'm gonna kind of go through it because I know it can be kind of overwhelming. Like, how do I practice? How do I warm up? So I'm gonna go through exactly how I go about my practice sessions, and hopefully you can implement these tips in your own practicing. So I always start out my practice sessions by warming up and stretching a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It kind of just depends on how tight I am, but I especially like to warm up my hips and my calves because that's kind of my problem areas and usually where I get really tight. I also have been practicing my middle splits. That's one of my goals for 2021. And honestly, watching this video back, I'm way closer than I thought I was. Like, it actually doesn't look too bad. You can see I'm actually kind of impressed with myself. So usually when I go into a practice session, I usually go in with two different mindsets. One is a lab and one is a session. A session is just like when I want to go dance and feel and have fun. And then a lab is when I'm more focused on certain moves or my technique. And so today was a lab session and my focus was on two different moves. One was this little glide combo and the other was the ghillie step, which are these like toe taps. Whenever I go into a lab session though, I only try to focus on 1 to 3 things at a time. I recommend for those of you who are kind of like, I know all these moves, but I never incorporate them into my flow, focus on only 1, 2, maybe 3 moves at a time. Shuffling is all about muscle memory, and the way you build that muscle memory is repetition. Rather than doing a bunch of moves just once or twice, do like 1 to 3 moves a bunch of times, and that's what will build that muscle memory so that these moves just come naturally. And whether it's a lab or a session, I always start by warming up to slow music. This really allows me to kind of get into a good groove. It allows me to warm up. If I'm going into a lab session, I usually start out drilling the moves. I will just do them over and over again. Again, it's all about repetition, repetition, repetition. And once I kind of get a good feel for those moves, that's when I'll try and like go into a flow and then incorporate that move into my flow. Also, because I'm at the gym, I'm practicing in front of a mirror. This is so helpful because you're basically getting like instant feedback. If you can't do that, what I recommend is filming yourself and then watching your videos back. I know some people kind of get uncomfortable in front of the camera, but I promise you, if you start recording yourself, you will see leaps and bounds in your growth. Once I'm all warmed up, that is when I go into the faster music. Usually most songs I listen to are anywhere from 120 to 138. 138 being on the high end, being like trance music. Because I've already drilled the moves a bunch, I usually just go straight into a flow while trying to incorporate those new moves that I was practicing. Sometimes you're gonna hit the move and sometimes it's not gonna feel quite right, but make sure that even when you mess up, keep going, because that's where you're gonna see a bunch of growth. So right here after this flow, I noticed that I didn't really like the way that glide combo was looking. So I practiced the move a few times over again, and then I also practiced how I was gonna transition into it. That way when I'm actually in a flow, I don't have to think about how I'm gonna get into the move. And same goes for transitioning out. Figure out how you wanna transition out of the move, and then you have this like short little sequence that you can throw into your shuffling that'll be a lot easier than being like, oh man, how do I get into this new move that I just blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean. Usually when I'm practicing, I prefer to listen to a mix rather than songs. That way I'm not like taken out of my groove by changing songs. The mix just kind of continuously flows and I can take breaks when there's lulls in the mix It's just preferred for me, but to each their own. Also, I have a bunch of screen recordings on my phone from people who inspire me or things that I want to learn, and I will often refer back to those when I am practicing. Right here is where I'm watching one of my favorite shufflers, SB Val, Shuffle Babes Val. So I watched her video. I was like, okay, how does she transition out of this? And then I tried to incorporate that into my own flow. When you're learning a new move, it's a lot easier to take inspiration from other people at first and then kind of make it your own once you feel comfortable with it. Then if you notice here, the camera quality got way worse, and that's because my nice camera died, so sorry. And if I'm being 100% honest, I was not peaking during this practice session. It wasn't bad by any means, but it just wasn't the best. And you're totally gonna have practice sessions that aren't always gonna be your best, but that doesn't mean you didn't improve or grow. And what I find is usually it's not the day that I'm practicing the new moves that I am killing it. It's usually the day after, once I've kind of had a good sleep and they all kind of sink in. What I usually like to do is lab, and then the next day have a session, and that's just For those of you wondering how to record on your phone, get a tripod or a little stand. I just use this little perch mount thing. And then you can either use an app called Media Monster to play music and record, or you can go to your phone, hold down the camera button, slide it to the right, and then it will start recording your video while playing the music. Then at the end of my practice session, I wanted to end it with a little bit of trance, high energy, and I just went balls to the wall as hard as I could. I was pretty exhausted, not gonna lie, but shuffling to trance just feels so right. I hope this video was helpful for you guys to kind of show you what a typical lab session looks like for me. If I was just seshing, it would just be me putting on good music, just dancing, having a good time. Absolutely no rules or structure to it whatsoever. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you aren't already, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a video. I love you though, and I'll see you in the next video.